For 18 years, Ben Franklin, the great American inventor, diplomat, and signer of the Declaration of Independence, was a tenant in a beautiful four-story Georgian house at 36 Craven Street in London, mere blocks from the River Thames. As ambassador for the colonies, he entertained, lived, and even allowed other intellectuals of the time to stay at the house while he lived there from 1757 through 1775. Nearly 225 years later, as the house stood dilapidated and on the brink of collapse, a group called the Friends of Benjamin Franklin House decided to renovate the building and turned it into a museum honoring one of America's founding fathers. Work commenced, but only a month into the renovation, a construction worker named James Field made a startling discovery in the windowless basement, a human thigh bone sticking out of the dirt-filled pit. After further excavation, with the help of the London police, more than 1,200 other bones, all dated from about 200 years prior, were discovered in this 1 meter wide and 1 meter deep pit. This begged the question, what were human bones doing in Ben Franklin's house? Was one of our honored American heroes also the United States' first serial killer? The short answer to that latter question is no. Mr. Franklin was a lot of things, but murder wasn't one of them. After the discovery, the Friends of Ben called Dr. Simon Hilson and his team from the London Institute of Archaeology at University College London. After a bit of research and analyzing the remains, they soon came to the conclusion that the bones once belonged to William Hewson, an anatomist pioneer and father of hematology, the study of blood and blood diseases. So how did the bones end up in Ben Franklin's basement? In a famed experiment in front of the Royal Society in 1770, Hewson used the flow of mercury through a turtle to show how blood moves through the lymphatic system. This earned him high praise, election into the Royal Society, and the Copley Medal. It also gained him a friend and admirer in Ben Franklin. On July 10, 1770, Hewson also married Mary Stevenson, a female acquaintance of Franklin and the daughter of Franklin's landlady at 36 Craven. Ultimately, Hewson was in need of a place to work, and Franklin offered to let him come live at 36 Craven and open his own anatomy school there. He accepted, and his school officially opened at Ben Franklin's residence in September of 1772. Among the bones found in 1998 at 36 Craven were the remains of 15 different people, adults and children. They also showed dissection marks made from 18th century surgical instruments. For example, a femur bone was found that was cut cleanly through, probably used to demonstrate the proper technique for amputation. Skull fragments showed drill holes likely made from a tree panning device, a pre-industrial revolution practice, though rarely still performed today, where holes were drilled into the skull to relieve pressure on the brain. Additionally, excavators found remains of several different kinds of animals, horses, cows, pigs, and even a turtle spine. It was clear that these remains were being used for medical and scientific study. But why didn't Hewson properly dispose of them? Why was he going to great lengths to hide what he was doing, and where did these human remains come from? Throughout the Middle Ages and through the 16th century, dissections and autopsies were completely illegal in England. This gradually changed starting in the 17th century when anatomical theaters were set up in many European cities for doctors and students alike to learn about the human body. During this time, according to the Einstein College of Medicine in Bronx, New York, dissection was associated with great dishonor and would often be used as a deterrent against committing serious crimes. For example, the Murder Act of 1752 allowed for capital punishment as well as having this provision: the body so delivered to said company of surgeons shall be dissected and anatomized by said surgeons or such persons as they shall appoint for that purpose. In other words, dissection became part of the sentence. But dissection was only for those who had already had their demise planned for them by the state. As anatomy schools grew in practice, the first official one opened at Penn University in 1745, the school founded by Ben Franklin, the demand for cadavers rose. There was simply no way the amount of executed, convicted criminals was going to match the need for dissectable bodies. So, doctors, scientists, and surgeons turned to a less than savory practice: grave robbing. In a few cases, the shortage of bodies for medical professionals in Europe and America even spurred some to commit murder in order to sell the bodies to medical professionals. While it is not proven that William Hewson resorted to grave robbing, and he presumably didn't murder anyone, it seems likely, considering the range and amounts of bones he had, that he at least paid grave robbers for bodies, if not did the deed himself. As for how involved Franklin himself was in these illegal dissections and the anatomy school, there is no evidence in either direction, though he did know the work Hewson did and no doubt was well aware of resurrectionist practices to supply medical professionals with the bodies they needed for their work. While the means with which Hewson acquired at least some of the bodies were likely illegal, the work he did was extremely important. From 1772 to his death 2 years later, William Houston made several discoveries related to the human body. He became the first person to observe lymphocyte production in the thymus and spleen. He became the first to describe clearly the three components of blood: red blood cells, white blood cells, and plasma. He correctly reported that red blood cells were disc-shaped, unlike his contemporaries who thought the cell was spherical. Unfortunately, Houston's life met a tragic and rather ironic ending. He contracted septicemia, a massive severe blood infection, in 1774 from a dissection wound and died. Today, the Ben Franklin House on 36 Craven in London is open to the public as a museum. It is the last remaining home of the man himself. William Houston's dissection bones are currently on display in the seminar room in the house.